Hello, welcome back to the David Watson podcast. As always, thank you very much for joining me. I do appreciate it. Today I spoke with Sally Hunter, who wrote Transfigured Sea. And during our conversation, we kind of got into some of those dynamics around where events in life, the traumas that we can face, can be very reflective of nature. I hope you enjoy it. Hello, welcome to the David Watson podcast. My apologies because you're in an unusually cold position for Australia.
That's right, but I'm very warm. I'm rugged up.
Rugged up.
You'd think I was going skiing. I've got a scarf and a puffer jacket, and I'm cosy.
Central heating's on full blast. So we're going to talk about Transfigured Sea, which is the book you've just recently wrote. Before we get into that, where does life start for you?
Where does life start?
Yeah.
Well, I was born in Adelaide, and I did a lot of different things until I decided that I was in love with biology. So I studied that and got a science degree, and I'm still in love with all sorts of animals and plants. Yeah. And after I did that, I was going to do honours, but instead I did environmental studies. When you love something, you want to protect it.
Yeah.
I love the environment, so it was good to learn how to protect it.
So roughly sort of what era was it when you started studying biology and environmental studies?
The 1980s.
1980s, okay.
Yes, I was a mature age student.
But I'm just trying to sort of picture what it was like, sort of like in the 80s, because I was born in 74, so I'm just trying to get a picture of like what the industries were like, what awareness was like, because knowledge could be quite localized. So before the internet, knowledge was quite localized, and that so any problems that you may or may not have had would be localized as well.
Yes. In those days, people knew about climate change if they were activists or members of an environmental group, but most other people hadn't heard of it in Adelaide, in Australia. So it was only a few years ago, was it 10 years ago, that it became a worldwide thing and everyone was talking about it.
Yeah, I think the thing I want to be careful here, because I think there's a difference between climate change, habitat destruction, human pollution, because I've yet to see anything that convinces me of climate change compared to where it was 10,000 years ago. Human impact, human destruction of habitat is, I think, something that we have to be held very accountable for. Human pollution, like plastics in the water, something completely human made, completely human created. And I think the climate change debate has polarized things that we may or may not be in control of versus things we're absolutely in control of. So when I think of the way that we dredge water, the way that we industrialize fishing, the way that we've pumped plastics into the water, things that are 100% we are responsible for there's just no debate otherwise. We created those issues and continue to create them.
Yes. Well, I didn't study the science or meteorology of climate change, so I can't really get into an argument about that. I believe it's human made. I trust the scientists,
It's not.
and I hope that we can do something about it
Well,
because it would be pretty terrible otherwise.
because obviously that's not. We're here to talk about your book, which is why I don't want to kind of get into a polarized conversation. And the reason I say that is because when we say we trust the science, we don't seem to discuss things like a Milankovitch cycle anymore. The Milankovitch cycles, which is the orbit of the Earth around the sun over various different sort of thousands of years, which we used to teach in schools. We don't talk about the ice cores taken from Greenland that say 10,000 years ago it was 3.5 degrees warmer than it is today. You know what I mean? So,
wow, that'd be nice. Yeah. That'd be nice. I'd like that.
But
it was a bit warmer.
Yeah.
No, I can't discuss that. I'm afraid. Not my area of expertise.
No.
In Transfigured Sea, I write about the sea creatures and the fish and the plants under the ocean. And I think when I was writing about them, the more I wrote, the more I loved them. And then I wanted to protect them. And I think when people read Transfigured Sea, they will also come to love them and want to protect them. I didn't get into any environmental issues in Transfigured Sea. It's an optimistic, ideal world where the sea hasn't been damaged yet that I wrote about.
Because what is the coast like off Adelaide? Because I've never been there.
We've got lovely beaches, white sandy beaches. Some beaches have got lovely picturesque cliffs with pigeon nests in them. There's good surf if you go down south.
Nice.
Yeah. And there's good sea creatures. There's some that change. I think they're a squid, and they change their colours to fit their environment. And lots of people travel up to go scuba diving to see them because they're very pretty.
Yeah, I can imagine. You said you were born in Adelaide. How has it kind of evolved since you were a child?
Oh, Adelaide used to be very conservative. It was called the City of Churches. But we had a premier called Don Dunstan who was very progressive, and he brought in a lot of art and culture, and we got a festival theatre and things like that. But yes, it's progressed quite a lot. And now you can talk to anybody about climate change or the environment or saving paper, and they know what you mean and why, which is great.
Yeah, of course. So, but when you were a child, or when did you first notice this love for the seaside?
Oh, we used to go to the beach all the time, every week.
So
with my parents and my brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Loved it.
So how old do you think you were when you started to notice that there was this passion to protect what you could see around you?
That didn't really come until I was writing Transfigured Sea. I think. I was an environmentalist before that, in a general sense, but as it related to the ocean, it was because
Yeah.
of Transfigured Sea.
So when did you first write Transfigured Sea then?
Well, it took me about 10 years.
Uh-huh.
I wrote a short story first, which is in the book Structure of Light, which is mainly poetry. And then from that short story, I worked on it and turned it into a novel. At the Writers' Centre in Adelaide in 2017, they had a course called Manuscript Incubator. And that was to teach us how to write a novel. And there were about 3 of us out of 15 who actually produced novels as a result of that course. And I was one of them.
Is that where that nature writing style comes from?
No. The main person who influenced me about nature writing is a woman called Inga Simpson. She wrote a beautiful book called Understory, which is about trees. Uh-huh. She lived in a house in a forest, and she describes the trees in loving detail. And she ran a masterclass just a couple of years ago about nature writing, and I met her there. She was going to come to the launch of Transfigured Sea, but she had something else on at the time. But I talk about the natural environment as if it's as important as any other of the main characters in the book.
Yeah. So, because I've never heard the phrase nature writing style, and I was curious, and I am curious to understand what that means, or if somebody was to approach it from that point of view, what would be the process?
Well, there's a lot in my book about the sea creatures.
Uh-huh.
Probably 50%. And their behaviour and shape and form often parallel the behaviour of the 2 women in the book, uh-huh, who are the other main characters.
So what is that in terms of a style of writing?
I don't know what you mean.
Oh, sorry, because one of the things that was sent through to me is that you employed a nature writing style to tell the story, and it's not a phrase I've heard before.
Well, it just means giving as much importance to the natural environment as you would to any other main character.
Okay, you did say that. I just didn't understand it as that.
Yeah. Okay.
So that it kind of incorporates all of the elements as integral parts of the story.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
My writing is also poetic,
uh-huh,
and lyrical, and Transfigured Sea has a number of poems in it. I think every chapter has at least one poem.
Do you still write poetry?
Yes, I do. I love poetry.
So when you're sitting down, say, to write poetry, what would your process be? How do you go about doing that?
Well, I want to get into a bit of a meditative state, and then it's good to have one main thing that inspires me, which might be the ocean, the waves hitting the rocks and washing around in a turbulent manner, which seems to be calling on your emotions that are turbulent.
Yeah.
And I might, I don't like the ocean when it's like that, but I might write a poem about it.
I think there's an interesting analogy in that, isn't there? Or an interesting observation in that when there's a turbulent sea and the way it crashes against the rocks, it can be a perfect reflection of where someone's emotions might be.
That's right. And they might be putting the lid on those emotions, not admitting them. But when they see the sea, they can't handle it.
Yeah. But it's interesting because the sea, when I think about the parallel to our emotions and the phrase you use about the turbulent waves crashing on the rocks, it's almost like the sea, if you look at it as an intellectual feeling entity, it's like a storm somewhere is almost like the sea releasing its emotions and frustrations.
Yes. In Transfigured Sea, I say that the sea is a dream. The sea is a place of change. It is a whisper of emotion and a memory of intuition. It dwells in the subconscious.
Could you repeat that? There's something about that caught me. Could you repeat that for me?
The sea is a whisper of emotion,
a memory,
and a memory of intuition.
I like that. That line, a memory of intuition. I don't know why that resonates, but
it's poetic, I think.
Yeah, but it seems to have I don't know. Do you know sometimes when you hear something and it has a deeper meaning than you're aware of, and you
that's right.
It's almost like a memory of intuition. Like there's an old memory somewhere that's like, this, you already understand this, and I don't know. It just, when I heard you say that the first time, it just made me pause and sort of, a memory of intuition.
Yes, I think you're right. And I think if people read Transfigured Sea right to the end, they will find a lot of depth in it. Laura, who's one of the women, has a big problem with her own mother.
Yeah.
And she has to work that through. So near the beginning, I've put a poem called Mother Sea, which is how Laura felt her mother treated her, which was bashing her against the rocks and throwing her out, not doing any of it in a subtle way, but in a very cruel way. And it hurt Laura a great deal. But she works through that in her imagination, and comes to a point where she can forgive her mother, which is a great triumph.
Again, you said something that has caught me off guard slightly, because the observation of parallels between what happens down on the beach, that you connect to what happens in humans.
Yes. Well, you want to follow that through until the end of the book, because in Transfigured Sea, I have written about spirituality in an indirect way, which I think is often the best way, as if you're seeing something out of the corner of your eye.
Oh, definitely, most definitely. But one of the things that I find myself thinking about as I'm listening to you is, did you? I'm trying to think how to articulate. I love it when I don't know. I've got something bugging me and I don't know how to ask the question because I don't know what the correct question is to get the answer that I'm looking for. You know, I'm searching for an answer of something, and it's to do with the way that you have these analogies that are like the perfect piece of a jigsaw that finish off the picture. But
yes,
and the perfect kind of reflection of something that's going on that can be quite traumatic or stressful for somebody. So there's obviously an observation of human life and human interactions where you've seen both the pain and the beauty, but you articulate it in a writing form with that nature style of writing.
Yes.
And I've forgotten somewhere in there was supposed to be a question.
Well, I can explain a bit better. Near the beginning, there are some organisms that cling on to the rocks. And I said, that's like some people who will cling on to the past or cling on to a partner. And that may not always be the best thing. There are other organisms in the ocean, like lobsters or crayfish, we call them, which have a hard shell. And that's often like people as well. You can't penetrate that hard shell to get at who they really are.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, what is it that you've? Because there's a couple of things for me that's happening at the same time. Whilst one hand, Transfigured Sea is about bringing people a closer awareness to the environment. There seems to be actually a conversation that has nothing to do with the sea and nothing to do with the environment. It's about fixing broken people or people who are lost.
That's right. Yes, but the sea is a good place to do that.
It
is. Because the sea is a place of change.
Yes, but I'm trying to understand, because everything you've said is correct, but I wonder how deeply and passionately you care about people as much as it actually has anything to do with the sea.
You're quite provocative, aren't you?
No, I don't mean it like that. I mean it in the sense that when I first read the descriptions of what's coming to me and talking to you, there's this love and passion for the sea. And that nature style of writing that you've used is actually a way of helping people understand the roller coaster of life, and that the sea and nature is a good example of being alive. So that place of passion for the environment also seems to be deep rooted in you care about people.
Most of the characters in Transfigured Sea were based to some extent on people I knew. Laura is a biologist and a poet, and so am I.
Yeah.
Daphne has been sexually assaulted in her past, and so have I.
Okay.
So there's a lot of similarities to people I know.
So, yeah.
And the mother figure in Transfigured Sea, the mother figure is not like my mother at all. Not at all. But she is like someone I know.
Yeah. So it's just like many years ago, I wrote a book called 22 Floors, and I've discussed this kind of many times, but it was about somebody that committed suicide and how their soul reincarnated, and it's all of the kind of analogies of rebirthing, recreation, starting over, all of those things. You can put as many labels on it as you want, and part of it was almost a cathartic therapy for me to understand a transition I'd gone in my own life, and part of it was also a way to help other people. Kind of that old analogy that sometimes you need to get a little bit lost to find your way, and that when we can feel a bit lost, there's a lot of chaos in that can make us feel we have less direction than we actually do. And listening to how reflective you've taken actual things that happen with people, and you've shown people this reflection of how it can be beautiful in the sea, and even though it can be traumatic, even though it can be stressful, even though it can be destructive, there is a natural cycle, there is a nature to it, and I just think it's absolutely stunningly beautiful the way you connect the dots and reflections, and how helpful that is to people, and it's how much of it is really a book about the beauty of the sea, and how much of it is a book to help people.
I think it's both. Yeah. Thank you for the compliment.
No, it's definitely correct. It's definitely due. It's just it's a remarkable way to this. I don't want this to be misunderstood, but it's just like, do you know when you see? I don't know if you've ever gone to a bookshop and you see those self-help books and coaching books and stuff like that. And
right.
And it's like, on one hand, am I going to read a book about nature? Or on the other hand, whilst reading about nature, I'm actually going to get some self-help. But it doesn't belong. It doesn't belong in that corporate book stand, because that's not what it's about. It's that, that spiritualism that you're referring to, that kind of connecting on a deeper level, and it's more than just the words on the paper.
That's right. Yes, that's why I like the book. If you asked me my favourite part of Transfigured Sea, I would say the first page is very good, because Laura, the mother, she's fantasising that she's the mother of Daphne, the sea sprite, and she's musing about the nature of the sea. And I like that. I also like the ending. So it's worth continuing.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is always worth continuing. Can we go back? You said you studied marine. Was it marine biology? You said. I might be mistaken. In the 80s?
No, I studied biology with a major in water resources.
Okay.
I didn't actually study marine biology until I found a book that had all these creatures in it, and it divided up into the different ecosystems of the sea. And I based my book on that book. I've given acknowledgement in the back of the book. Yeah. But what was I going to say? Oh, yes, about the environmental aspect. I think in my website, I have a list of the threats to the ocean at the moment. And I also have a list of practical solutions, what we as ordinary people can do to help. So my website is sallyannhunter.com.
Yeah, I'll make sure that link is in the description as well.
Oh, good. Yes, sallyannhunter.com. There's only one dot in the whole thing. And there's no E after Anne, it's just A-double-N.
Okay. I'm just writing that down. I think I've already got it in the thing, but I'll make sure I've got it. So, So one the question that I was going to go for is, there was a point where you'd signed up to, actually, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do some form of education to learn more.
Mm.
What led you to do that? What was happening before then? Do you know, like, at some point you must have been sitting down somewhere thinking, actually, I want to go and study this? Because you said you've already said you were a mature student at the time. So what was happening that you thought, actually, I'm going to go and do this?
Well, I was studying English literature and poetry at Flinders University in Adelaide. And a show came on television called Life on Earth, produced by David Attenborough. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's in the UK. He's a well-known naturalist and filmmaker for the BBC. He's made a lot of films since then. That was his first one. And I was just hooked. Absolutely. I blame him for everything. I went to study biology straight away. They had a course for people who hadn't studied it before, people who were doing arts degrees, etc. You could do 1 year of biology. So I did that, but I wanted to continue. So I had to do a little bit of chemistry and earth science to fill the requirements for a science degree, but it was mainly biology that I did, a bit of molecular biology and cell and developmental biology, which is embryos, the development of embryos.
Okay. I've literally nowhere to take that last line. The development of embryos. It's so before the biology, you were studying English literature and poetry. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you saw the David Attenborough Life on Earth.
Yes.
And so that led to the biology. So pre-literature, what made you? What was happening? I'm trying to. So you were talking about embryo, so which is kind of the beginning of life, and I'm trying to understand how you evolved to where you are today. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it began being born in Adelaide, but at some point you'd gone into university. So what was it that led you to go into university?
Oh, I'd always wanted to go to university. I just grew up knowing that that's what I would do. And luckily my family supported me in that. I started learning transcendental meditation.
Okay.
I practice that now. I've been doing it 50 years. I meditate twice a day, every day. That calmed me down a lot. So I met my husband and we got married and moved to a lovely house in the hills. And I still had this desire to study. So I went back to study part-time, doing English literature, and a subject called the craft of poetry, which is all the technique that you use as a poet. And then I saw David Attenborough's program, as I said before.
Yeah. So it's so there was an horrific trauma, and somehow it didn't defeat you.
That's right.
And
I also use Sorry.
No, please carry on.
I use writing as a form of catharsis, not so much in Transfigured Sea, but privately.
Yeah.
And the more you write, the deeper you go, you get catharsis. You might get a different perspective on the problem, a different insight, which helps. If I keep writing and writing, I get in touch with my spirituality.
Yeah.
Which is beautiful.
It is. I am a therapist, and one of the things I recommend to everybody is to write. Just write it down. And and when you think you can't write anymore, just write blah blah blah. Why do I think about this? And
yes,
because I'm the same. When I've had my darkest moments, it's on paper that it seems to leave the pencil and offload onto the page, and I get that different perspective, that different insight. Because it suddenly feels like the outside looking in, and sometimes the pieces of chaos become a clear picture. But I'm most successful at doing that when I write it down.
Yes, Laura couldn't do that in Transfigured Sea because you can't have a paper and pencil if you're in the middle of the ocean.
No, but, I suppose you could write in the sand, but
she used her imagination, and that worked quite well.
So, going back to the characters in Transfigured Sea, and you mentioned that some of them are a reflection of real people. Which came first, the characters, or do you know, like, so because when I was writing my book, I often think about, one of the things I like to help people with is other people's perspective on the structure of writing and how they did it, because one of the hardest things I found when learning to write is that there isn't a one solution that fits everybody. It's actually kind of, in part, in learning about your writing style, you've got to learn actually what are you when it comes to writing, where some people can be rigid and sit in the corner and be disciplined for an hour every day, whereas some people it's more reflective of flowing with the wind.
Yes. Oh yes, that would be true. But I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't learnt meditation. It's done me the world of good. The first thing I found with it was I had more self-confidence. I had a stronger foundation in myself. As I said, the second thing that happened was I met my husband, and that changed my life totally.
That's good.
And led on to study. And I love study. I always love finding out new things.
How did you discover transcendental meditation?
Well, a friend of mine told me about it. Yeah. And I went along to an introductory lecture, which is free. I believe they have them once a week on a Wednesday night in Adelaide.
Yeah.
And there was a woman called Athena, who was a Greek from Cairo in Egypt. And she was living in Adelaide, and she knew a lot about meditating. And she was very patient with me and helped me a lot. And she said to me at one stage, don't ever miss. Do it twice a day. Don't ever miss. So I didn't. For about 30 or 40 years, I never missed. And it's done me a lot of good. Built up my character and my strengths.
What's your routine around doing it then? If it's a daily practice.
Mm-hmm.
What's your routine
Well,
around it?
I get up in the morning. I get up quite early, and I do exercises for about half an hour or more, and then I have a wash. Then I meditate, and then I have breakfast, and then I get dressed.
So it's almost yeah, okay, yeah. That structure of it's before you kind of greet the day. It's the preparation for the day.
Yes, that's right. I also meditate in the evening. At the moment, I'm doing a longer program in the evening. And after I stop speaking to you, I'm going to meditate, because I always meditate at 6 o'clock.
Oh. So, yeah. So I might be disrupting your time. Is there? I'm sorry. I've lost my track of thought. Then, it's when you. How did you know the book was finished?
Oh, well, I think you'll know when you read it. Have you read it?
No. So I have this very kind of strict rule. I don't read anybody's stuff because I'll lose curiosity to who you are. So I come in.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I come in wanting to know as little about you as possible. So I have like the press release, which I read the questions about and stuff like that. And from that, because I'm somebody that relies on curiosity to listen. And
yes.
and I want to hear what you have to say. And so if I read too much or get too much of an awareness of who you may or may not be, I find I lose that edge of curiosity that I rely on, because it enables me to listen.
Oh, that's understandable. That's good.
Yes. So I discovered as a person, as an individual, that when I'm talking to somebody, the less I know up front, the better I am at listening.
Yes.
So they send me They send me through everything, and I want to know who you are as a person, and I want to know why this person kind of went through the whole process of thinking about a book, writing a book, how the book developed, because there's always these kind of so many different journeys, and so many people approach those journeys differently, and I get to kind of be like a child in a playground and get to play with all of these different areas, and the way that I'm able to do that is by never learning too much until I arrive at the playground.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I rely on it.
I suggest that after this interview, you read the first page or so, talking about that before, and you read the last two chapters.
Okay. I will do that.
And then you'll see what I mean, that I knew it was finished.
Right. Yeah, okay. That makes sense. Just lastly, you mentioned the effects of moonlight on the ocean, but how you've noticed it impacts yourself.
Well, I think because I meditate, I'm very intuitive, and when I saw the moonlight on the ocean, it was the same kind of shine and glitter and beauty as I felt in my heart.
Okay. So I have, the reason I've paused, I have an image of, obviously it's nighttime because of the moon, but you know when you see the moon. So for reference, I do surf. Although I'm in the UK, I do surf, and I have occasionally been able to do moonlight surfing, which is very difficult because you don't often get a good chance to do it. And it's obviously when you're doing that, when you're stood on the beach looking out, you can hear the waves, and you can't often see them the way that people might think you can. But what you do see is this, because it's often done on a full moon, because, you know, for obvious reasons. But you can hear the waves without necessarily being able to see them in any great detail. But there's a reflection off the water. And when you said about how that you feel that reflection in your heart, I just had this image popped up in my head of something I've seen in the past when I've been kind of getting ready to, you know how surfers often stand there on the beach looking out before they go in. It was a bit like that. It was just like it placed a scene in my head that I'd kind of long forgotten about, and it just took me back there for a moment.
That's good.
So have you noticed, though, do you notice your mood changes with the cycle of the moon then?
Oh, sometimes, yes. Things get very intense at full moon. You probably start to need a rest at the opposite time of the moon when it's very small. You might think, my goodness, I can't cope with everything. But as soon as the moon changes, grows bigger, as it grows, you grow in yourself. And you do all sorts of things you didn't think you could do.
Yeah. So, I'm just getting conscious of the time. I've got one last question, which I just like to ask everybody, and it's very random and not related to anything we discussed. Using your imagination, imagine that you had the ability to go back in time, or go anywhere in time. Where would you go? Why would you go there? What car would you drive to get you there? And what would you be listening to on the radio?
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, it's an overload.
That presupposes that they have cars and radio.
Well, because you need something to go back in, so...
Right. Well, there's two options. One is that I go back to my teenage years and give myself advice.
Okay.
And no offence to present company, but I would tell myself never to trust a man.
I think that's solid advice, to be fair. I would tell everyone, do not trust people. Do not trust people. Yeah. Trust yourself. Male or female, do not trust people. You do not know somebody. Just because you think you do. You do not know somebody.
That's true, yes. Where was I? The other option, I would go back to meet Virginia Woolf and ask her to teach me how to write like she did.
Yeah.
And maybe I could help her to cope with her mental problems. It would be nice to think I could. Oh.
What music would you listen to?
Music. I love classical music. And there's a piece of music that I listen to a lot at the moment, which is by Carl Jenkins, The Armed Man, A Mass for Peace.
Okay.
And there's one part of it called the Benedictus, and I play that over and over.
Benedictus.
It's very comforting.
Did you say it was called Armed for Peace?
The Armed Man.
The Armed
Man.
A
Mass for Peace.
Okay.
And the car I would drive, I don't know if it was invented in Virginia Woolf's day.
It's a magical world. We can do what we want.
Oh, good. Well, it would have to be electric.
Perfect.
Because that would help reduce carbon emissions, and that would help reduce the acidity of the ocean and the temperature of the ocean. Because the creatures in the sea can't tolerate even small shifts in those kind of things.
And that's the perfect place to stop. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And there you go. Sally and I discussing Transfigured Sea, the writing process, the process of people, how we think, how we heal. Seems to be a theme that I've come across a lot lately, and one that's important. So do check out Transfigured Sea. Do check out Sally Hunter. The website is sallyann.hunter.com. And as always, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you to those that subscribe, those that like, and those that share, and those that comment. It's always appreciated. It really is. And wherever you are from, whatever you believe, thank you. Be blessed and take care.